What made you realize your best friend was actually a complete asshole? Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy. Thanks. When she told me she was cheating on her husband, and then I found out she was cheating with my husband, I started to realize that they only ever talk about themselves. They rarely ask me a question, but then cut me off while I'm answering to make it about them. I was going through a really ugly breakup that left me in a very low point in my life. I was getting a lot of advice from my best friend on the whole situation. I told him that it would take time for me to get over her, as it was a relationship of over 2 years. 3 days after the breakup, I check Snap Maps and see that he is at my ex's apartment. It was 2 in the morning. He initially lied about it but then admitted to hooking up with her. I started crying over the phone and he literally said, "I just want you to know that I'm sorry this is hurting you, but I'm going to continue doing this with her." I lost my best friend of 22 years over that. It's crazy to me that one day, a friend who was a brother to me just snapped and ignored me in a really dark state of mind just so he could get laid. He lives by himself on the other side of the country now. Yeah, I've always assumed that they started talking while I was still with her. I'm aware that my ex was also at fault here. She was a piece of shit for getting with my best friend right after our breakup. I've just been cheated on before, so I guess it was easier for me to cope with that. But my best friend of 20 years doing that hurts more than any breakup I've ever had. I was poor and in college. I had the flu really bad one week and asked my friend, he lived in a dorm across the hall, to go to the convenience store in the dorm lobby and get me something to drink, and he could get whatever for himself too. He got me my soda and himself $40 worth of snacks. Didn't notice at the time, and I ordered us a pizza. He knew it was all I was going to have to eat for the next few days, and he snuck into my room and ate the leftovers while I was passed out on cold medicine. I didn't even really know how to respond. Like I was already buying him snacks and feeding him. He had a meal plan on campus, I didn't. Why act like that? Looking back on it, a red flag was when they insulted my mother's cooking. My family isn't very wealthy, but my mother does her best, and she had worked hard to make that meal so they wouldn't be hungry. And then they just insulted it. Also, they never said thank you. Unless it's got worms in it, you just don't say anything bad about a meal someone took the time and care to prepare for you as a guest. And it wasn't even a simple "I didn't like it very much." They straight up made fun of my mom and called her a terrible cook, which BTW, she isn't. For a long time, I thought that my best friend was an asshole for kicking me out of the apartment we shared. He was the leaseholder in college. In reality, I was a horrible roommate who partied too much and didn't clean up after myself. I was the asshole. Friends I used to hang out with in high school. One of the group had been a good friend of mine since we were really young, even though we went to different schools. It was his house the others always hung out in, so I was kind of grandfathered into his new friends group from his school. I always felt a little unwelcome just 'cause of little things. They'd be playing video games, passing the controller, and I was always last, if I got a turn at all. If someone brought food or something to share, I would always get the least of it. FYI, I brought things to share more than anyone, so it wasn't like I was a big mooch or something. And they frequently made plans outside of my buddy's house to which I was never invited, but then they'd openly talk about it in front of me later. What really hit it home was one time I was hanging out there and found out they were all planning on going into the city for a concert or something. They straight up told me I wasn't invited, which I shrugged off 'cause I didn't really have money for it anyway. But then their ride fell through and I offered to drive them. They treated that like it was absolute worst case scenario, and also like if they were to accept my offer, they'd be somehow doing me a favor. I said, okay, forget it. Message received. I left and never talked to them again. None of them ever tried to contact me again either. But it was really only childhood friend whom I was really disappointed in. I thought for sure he'd at least check in after that obviously devastating interaction. But that was many years ago. Thankfully, I have much better friends now. Best friends since elementary. In high school, when I told her I no longer wanted to be friends because she was mean to others all the time, including me, she said that I had to be friends with her 'cause she was my friend in elementary and middle school, even though everyone told her not to be, and that everyone talked behind my back about how gross and weird I was, and she stayed my friend anyhow. She worded it like she was doing me a huge favor by being my friend and that I somehow owed her for that charity. Over time we lost contact. Then she only reached out when she needed money. I let this go on too long until I found out I was pregnant with my first and told her that I wouldn't send any money after that. She still asked. My daughter is now over 1.5 and she had never even met her. I ended up blocking her and telling her not to bother trying to reach out anymore. Easy. When I went on a family vacation with him and his family, seeing how he treated his partner, how out of control his kid was, and how much of a lazy and selfish court he was. Eye-opener. He would be a good friend to me in private situations, but when we were in groups or in front of total strangers, he would turn on me and try and embarrass me. After 2 to 3 years of it, I decided he would be better out of my life and haven't spoken to him for over 15 years. When she moved in with her boyfriend, who didn't like dogs, at first her two collies were locked in the basement, rarely taken for walks. Instead, they would just spread newspaper on the floor and switch it out when it was saturated. When the older of the two collies died, the remaining dog was banished to a small corner of the backyard chained to a doghouse. She didn't even go outside to feed her, but threw her food out of a window onto the ground. Only went out every other day or so to refill the water dish and pick up poop. She argued with me that all of the dog's needs were taken care of and she was fine. I draw the line at animal abuse. No one who I call a friend treats an animal like that. That's when I stopped being her friend. Haven't had any contact since. There was this girl I was dating. I really liked her. At one point I introduced her to a really good friend of mine. Let's say his name was Bill Moran, because that's what it was. Fast forward a few days. I'm out on a date with that girl. She asked me what I thought about Bill. I told her he was a good friend of mine. She told me he was bad news, that he's asked her out. Mind you, it's not like we were in high school or anything. We were adults. She told him she wasn't interested, that he obviously had honesty, loyalty issues, and wasn't a fit person to associate with at all, in any way, for anybody. He knew I liked her a lot. He did it anyway. Fuck that guy. I haven't spoken to him since. It didn't work out between she and I, but that's okay. It took time, but I've come to realize that I've been a complete asshole to every one of my good friends. My good friend was staying in a small trailer in the backyard of his parents' place. He invited me to come crash with him. I had a spot in the trailer. His folks were kind to me and let me shower and got me out a towel and they fed me. I didn't do anything to contribute during my time there. In fact, I got peeved that my friend would listen to rock music while he slept. It legitimately pissed me off. I had no right to be pissed and should have been grateful to have a bed to sleep in at night, not to mention everything else being provided for me without asking for anything in return. It's moments like these that serve as a reminder to me how selfish I once was. I've also been the kind of person who just likes to be contradictory, like sometimes to the point of being practically combative. I was with another good friend of mine, and for some reason, I decided I was gonna go on some spiel about how meaningless words are to the point that I decided I would illustrate by calling him bitch. And I tried to convince him that he shouldn't be upset as I continued to call him a bitch over and over and over again. I mean, incessantly not stopping. He was red in the face, but he said nothing to me except to not do that, which I ignored. I now realize I was an awful person for that. I was his friend, not his counselor or priest or whatever the fuck I thought I was. A friend should be able to seek comfort in friendship, and here I was trying to apply some holier-than-thou mindset that was really just abusive. I used to take pride in being difficult to work with, in being difficult to understand, in being an acquired taste of a human being because that meant I wasn't some conformative, two-faced, flaky person like the ignorant masses. I said what I meant and I meant what I said. Unfortunately, everything that I meant was vapid and narrow and churlish. I'm still very much a person in need of improvement in every facet of my life, but I certainly have no intention of repeating past mistakes, and I hope to be better to be around for anyone I would call a friend. Not in an embarrassed way either. She was throwing it in my face to hurt me. I hoped against my own instincts that it wasn't true, but I asked him and knew instantly from the look in his eyes that it was. Basically lost my whole friend group overnight, but ended up finding much better friends in the long run. It all works out. When I trusted and believed he was like a brother only to have him steal thousands of dollars from me. The money didn't even matter, but the treason hurt for years. He was going through a divorce. Said she was making all kinds of wild charges against him. Like rape. You can't rape your wife, she's literally mine. That put a lot of perspective on things, and we haven't spent time together since. I happily watched her son while she and her boyfriend went to Jamaica for 10 days. He was an awesome teenager, and we had great fun. It added 45 minutes to my work commute each way, but it was fine. They were due to return, and I was going home. Then I got a call that something happened and their return was delayed. She couldn't give me details, but would tell me when they got home. I had no answers to give her 14-year-old son for his concern. There were no phone calls to him from his mom. They returned 12 days later than anticipated. I learned it a couple of days later, after we had time alone, that she and boyfriend tried to bring Ganya back with them through the Miami-Dade airport, no less. I lost all respect for her as a single parent. Her actions were incredibly selfish considering her son still needed raising. She had no family nearby that could raise him, and she could have been fired. The nail in the coffin was when I asked for my then BF's camera back. She went on a horrible racist rant. She said she left it in the rental car, went back to retrieve it, and that foo asterisk hashing Nia plus hash are cleaning the car must have stolen it. I simply told her that she needed to replace the camera. I cried that day for the loss of the friend who I loved and respected. During that conversation she laid out how he was lying to all of his friends about her and all of the bad stuff he said about his friends behind our backs. Apparently he got done with drugs when he was still living with his parents and he just put it on me. It sounds like that was his go-to excuse for anything, that it was my fault or my influence. Then, when the flirting got too serious, trying to hook me up with that guy so she wasn't the bad guy. When I told her I had absolutely no interest and the situation made me highly uncomfortable, she then proceeded to tell her flirt I liked him, gave him my number, and told him to contact me. Realized after that this wasn't the first time she had tried to pawn her near infidelities onto me. Don't know how I didn't see it before. Low-key hoping a story that sounds like me isn't in here.